What's up, everyone? My name is Ramiro. I live here in Los Angeles, California. I'm from New York originally, but living here in Los Angeles now. I'm a member of Anticonquista. Anticonquista is the Communist Party of the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora. And welcome to episode 3 of Decolonizing Media. Decolonizing Media is a new video podcast dedicated to exposing mainstream media and how they cover everyday topics, especially those that relate to Latin America and the Caribbean. In the fight against imperialism, information is half the battle. That's why we started this podcast. We feel it's our duty to expose the propaganda that we're constantly fed by the 5 or 6 companies that own all of the media, and to combat those lies with our own information and our own perspectives on stuff going on around the world. And so, I just wanted to say that because we can't begin to decolonize ourselves without decolonizing the media that's all around us. And so today, we're going to continue doing that with this latest episode. And I just want to thank everyone for tuning in, supporting Anticonquista. And again, this is Decolonizing Media. So today we're talking about midterm elections in the United States, which just recently passed. Every 4 years, midterm elections are held in November near the midpoint of the president's 4-year term in office. This year, it was held on Tuesday, November 6th. The federal offices that were up for election were members of the U.S. Congress, including all 435 seats in the House of Reps and over 30 seats in the Senate. 36 governors were elected or re-elected during this recent midterm election. Also on the ballot were mayoral races and campaigns for other local public offices and several citizen initiatives and propositions. Here in California, for example, one of the biggest issues was Proposition 10, which involves affordable housing. So overall, the midterms were seen as a referendum on Trump's Republican majority government, with Democrats hoping to win back some of the power they lost in 2016 during the presidential election. Before I move forward with the main argument for this video podcast, I just wanted to make a quick note. This episode isn't intended to break down the specifics of what happened during the midterms, nor is it intended for people who refuse to question so-called U.S. democracy. Instead, this episode is intended to convince you all, my Latin American and Caribbean people, and people descended from the global South in general, Asia, Africa, Latin America, that midterm elections in the United States are bullshit. And people descended from the global South benefit in no way from them at all. People across these regions are being bombarded, are dying every day, are dying of hunger because of countries like the United States that have built their empire on their resources and their people. So again, this episode is not dedicated to the people who, are posting go out and vote stickers and are so imbued in this fundamentalism about voting in the United States. This episode is dedicated to those people who have been belittled by both liberals and conservatives for questioning the electoral system in this country and feel that they're alone in doing so. And I mean, just the other day, I walked to 7-Eleven a few blocks away from here to get a coffee. And I was talking to a guy on the line about the midterm elections and was just asking him if he was thinking about voting. And he seemed like a regular guy from LA, working class Latino dude. And he was just saying basically that he's not going to vote because he feels that the system is corrupt, is not benefiting him in any way, whether Republicans and Democrats are in office. And I think his point is spot on. I think that regardless of who's ruling this empire, it's still the same vicious capitalist imperialist system that's hurting our people here within the belly of the beast, but also, more importantly, people back home in our countries, because they're being bombed every day. They're being stolen. Their resources are being stolen. And just in general, the conditions of poverty are being imposed on those countries by this country. And I think people can sense that. I think this attempt to make people feel dumb or seem as if they don't care about politics because they're not voting is just frankly immature and not reasonable. So I wanted to quickly show you excerpts from an article written by someone named Raul Reyes for USA Today. USA Today is a mainstream media publication, and I believe this article exemplifies this belittling of our people who don't vote or are skeptical about voting. The article is called "Latino Voters Like Me Need to Grab Our Chance to Push Back Against Donald Trump." The article starts with a subheader: President Trump is very comfortable disrespecting Latinos. By voting in the midterm election, we can take charge of our destiny and change history. He goes on to say, Democrats have a Latino voter problem. That seems to be the consensus among political strategists, according to media outlets across the country. Newspapers, websites, and cable news shows have all been reporting that Democrats are worried about the indifference they perceive among Hispanics, which is an incorrect term, towards next week's midterm elections. Cynicism, apathy, and fear are cited as reasons for why some Latinos, even in the Trump era, are not placing a high priority on casting ballots. As Cesar Gustamente of Nevada explained to the New York Times, there are times when you're just wasting your time on voting. Brother, just know. There are sound reasons to explain in part why Latinos' voter participation lags that of other groups, but not caring or being busy are not among them. As members of the country's largest minority group, Latinos are uniquely positioned to push back at a president who is very comfortable disrespecting us. It's time for us to step up and shape our future. So a little later on, he provides some statistics about the turnout rate, Latino voter turnout rate during the 2016 election. And I'm going to skip forward because this is where it gets more ideological. To my fellow Latino Americans, think about our community's many heroes and achievers. Did Cesar Chavez wait for a personal invite from the Democratic Party to organize his farm workers? No. Did Sonia Sotomayor wait for Ivy League schools to beg her to apply to their institutions? Of course not. These individuals changed history because they took charge of their own destiny and they became heroes in the process. In our own way, we can do the same and be heroes for our community by voting in the upcoming midterms. In fact, one of the greatest lessons that we can pass on to the next generation is the habit of voting, not just in presidential elections, but in all elections. Later on, he talks about, just the impact, and he says, the Latinos have the opportunity to participate in one of the most consequential midterm elections in recent history. Regardless of political affiliation, we must turn out in solid numbers for ourselves, for our families, and for our country. So that was the article by Raul Reyes. It's called Latino Voters Like Me Need to Grab Our Chance to Push Back Against Donald Trump, published in the USA Today, a few days before the midterm election, but still relevant nonetheless. In my opinion, no matter who won, Democrat or Republican, the U.S. capitalist imperialist system continues to exploit and kill workers in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The United States, where the majority of the world's stolen wealth is concentrated, will continue to destroy our planet and its people through war, exploitation of labor, and environmental destruction, regardless of whether Democrats or Republicans control Congress. This isn't some outlandish or utopian view. All we have to do is look back at the recent history of both the Democrats and the Republicans when they were in power. Under Obama, the United States built more military bases in Africa and killed more people with drones in the Middle East and South Asia than any other president. Under Bush, a Republican, the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, killed thousands of innocent people, and also funded bloody drug wars in Mexico and Colombia that have since also left thousands dead. Under Trump, all of this is continuing, and it's business as usual. Under both parties, massive atrocities have been and continue to be committed around the world. Countries have been invaded. People are being bombed. Entire economies are being privatized. While midterm elections may bring about some moderate, cosmetic, progressive changes to people living in the United States, don't forget that all of this is built and paid for by the blood, sweat, and tears of exploited people in the global South, including even the materials I'm using to make this video right now. The money used to finance social programs in the United States is stolen wealth taken from countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. An increase of wealth in the first world nations, like the United States, is based on the decrease of wealth in the global South. This is a third worldist perspective and is part of the broader communist understanding of global capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system based on private property and profits, inequality, and exploitation. That's really what it comes down to, capitalism. Well, what's the alternative to voting? The alternative is fight imperialism. Fuck midterms. Fight imperialism. Imperialism is the root cause of migration from the third world to the first world. And it's the reason why people like you and me who are descended from the global South are here to begin with. Because the first world has made our countries unlivable. Just take a look at the migrant caravan coming from Central America right now. These are people fleeing countries that have been affected by the capitalist imperialist system by the United States and who are now trying to survive and seek a better life. You know, that's a direct result of imperialism, of U.S. foreign policy. And as people who are descended from the global South, it's our duty to fight this empire from the belly of the beast and not participate in bourgeois elections that only serve to strengthen and empower the bankers and politicians on Wall Street and Washington. It's our duty to unite with our people back home and destabilize this country as much as we can, not to carve out our little coves within this parasitic exploitative system. Also, don't be fooled by attempts to co-opt our people. This country doesn't give a fuck about you or me, period. They only care about profits and stability. That's what it comes down to. That's the bottom line, profits and stability. Mainstream media try to make it seem as if we're empowering our people by participating in these imperialist elections. You know, liberals also like to point out that black and brown people in the United States fought for the right to vote through the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In fact, the opposite is true. We're only being used by wealthy white elite to create a more diverse appearing and intersectional form of imperialism. And also, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a Cold War era concession made by the imperialist powers, given that in socialist countries like the Soviet Union and China, oppressed nationalities were long given the right to vote and participate in the country's socialist electoral system. And you can find all of this in unclassified documents released by the US government, where officials openly explain that, you know, voting rights were extended to oppressed nationalities in order to prevent internal revolutions and support for Soviet and Chinese socialist systems. Saying otherwise is a complete revision of history. Look, at the end of the day, our assigned role as third world descended people within the imperialist political system is to diversify and justify global economic and political hegemony, not to overthrow it. That's why we should overthrow it, because it's not true liberation for our people. True liberation for our people is not going to come from the same system that has oppressed us. Why would anyone think that? And just because you question voting, that doesn't mean you don't care about politics or that you're stupid. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Lastly, I just want to add that I'm not an anarchist. I understand the state in the way that many other communists like Lenin and Mao have interpreted it. The state is an instrument of class rule used by one class to oppress another. In my opinion, the US state as a whole is oppressive and oppresses people all over the world, which is why I don't participate in its elections. However, I do believe that worker-led states like Cuba, like the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, represent progressive models for what working class democracy could look like. True democracy is run by the working class masses of the third world, not the wealthy 1% of the first world. So remember, just because you didn't vote doesn't mean you're dumb or that you don't care about politics. It means that you question this bourgeois political system and its intentions. You question the capitalist imperialist system. Fuck midterms, fight imperialism. That's what I have to say about all of this media coverage. Forget about the internal stuff. Democrats win this, Republicans win that. No, it's still a capitalist imperialist system, and it's a system that we have to fight and overthrow. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Anticonquista, and SoundCloud. And also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and IG at Anticonquista. And check out our website, anticonquista.com. Thank you all for tuning in today. This was episode 3 of Decolonizing Media on Anticonquista. Anticonquista is the Communist Party of the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora. And I welcome you to continue listening to us. Thank you for your support. Have a great week.